so much for joining. Thank you for backing. Thank you to everyone else who is also joining on YouTube. I've never done that before, so hopefully we can get people to join in on both platforms tonight. But yeah, first of all, if you have any questions, please feel free. Type them into the chat, type them into the questions section. I think we do have a couple questions that were submitted early. Thank you, Richard, for sending some in. They do have to relate to the setup of the game, so I can wait and hold off to answer those questions. Maybe once we get in and I'll show you how to set up and play the game if we don't have a ton of other questions that come in. So let me explain a little bit more about the game. As I mentioned, it's about the primary election. It's about trying to weed out the candidates within one political party. It's not Republican versus Democrat. It's not one-on-one. There's up to 5 people playing the game. You can play solo. I might teach you a little bit how to do that tonight. And you're all playing as these candidates trying to win the final nomination. So everything you'll see tonight are prototype components. I printed a lot of stuff at the Game Crafter here locally in Madison. They do an awesome job. This is from a company in New York, a couple other small print-on-demand companies. So the artwork is more or less final. I'm looking at some small tweaks here and there. If there's anything that you think doesn't look great or could be improved, please let me know. So the artwork is almost final. The components will be better once you get them out of mass production. This box is a little flimsy, a little thin. The real components will be much nicer and probably have different finishes. So it won't be so shiny. You won't get the glare on the board in the box. They'll have a nice matte finish. Things like that. So we can go ahead and I'll tell you a little bit of how to explain and set up the game. I'm going to tilt the camera down here so you can see some of the parts as we set them up. It looks like that'll do. Let me check in real quick on YouTube and see if we have anyone watching. Looks like nope. Probably Kickstarter tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Here's the board. This is the main place where you'll be playing the game with a primary. As you can see, the states have been grouped into regions here. So while the game tries to follow the inspiration of the primary election process here in the US, it doesn't quite follow it perfectly. It abstracts a little bit just to make it a little bit more fun to play, a little more streamlined, things like that. If you're not familiar, and we do have some backers who are from abroad, who aren't from the US necessarily. So the primary election process works where each state has delegates. In this game, they're abstracted down to regions, and the delegates are printed on the board within each region. So once you win a vote in a region, you'll earn its delegates. If there's only one number printed on the map, that means that it's a winner-takes-all vote. Whoever wins the vote in this region takes all the delegates. If there's 2 numbers printed on the map, that means there's a proportional vote going on, and somebody can win a first-place award for delegates and a second-place award for delegates. And it's just simply whoever has the most or second most influence in a region. So for the primary election process, states or regions in this game vote at different points in time. And it's a process that takes weeks, feels like it drags on for months. But it's a little bit different than our general election, which you're probably more familiar with, where, it's one candidate from the Republicans, one from the Democrats, maybe a third party here or there, and everyone votes at the same day. And by the end of the night, you pretty much know who's won. So in the primary election process, and in this game, the primary, states and regions vote at different points in time. So this is going to touch on the question from Richard. Let me see if I can find how to get to that. So how that's determined is with these round tokens. And each token has a different number printed on it. Some of them do have the same number printed on it, and I'll get to that in a second. But Richard asks, when, how often, and at what points in the game are votes taken? How do the round red tokens function in this regard? Okay, so I'm going to try and explain. The number printed on these tokens represent a round. So on this prototype, there's 12 rounds. In the final game, there's actually going to be 11. We've been working on implementing some playtest feedback just trying to make it the best game possible. And 11 rounds really felt like the best experience. So when you're going to set up the game, you're going to move a couple tokens into this non-voting tokens region or area on the board. And what that means is simply that no voting will be associated with these tokens. On the other hand, tokens that are placed in a region, so when you go to set up the game, you're going to randomly put one token in each region. I like to do this face down, but for the purposes of this live stream, I'm just going to skip that step. I'm randomly or pseudo-randomly distributing these guys around. So now that there's one token in each region, the number on the token represents during which round the region will vote. So when you're starting the game, you're going to use these little voting markers, and you're going to put them next to the current round. So we're starting at round 1. When round 1 is done, we'll move it to round 2. You can flip these over to show that the round has been completed. And then round 3 is when this region will vote. Again, rounds 1 and 2, there's no voting associated with those rounds because of the tokens that are located down here. So round 3, there's going to be a vote in this region because of this marker. We'll get to the phases of the game in a little bit. News, action, vote, organize. Phase 3 is vote. And within phase 3 of round 3 is when this region votes. After round 3 finishes, we would move to round 4, where there's actually 2 votes going to happen. Here in the purple region and down here in the orange region, there's 2 round tokens with the number 4, meaning 2 regions are going to vote. So on and so forth. You'll move these around as the regions vote. So Richard, that's what the red side of the round tokens represents. Each number printed on the red side is the round during which that region will vote. And your other part of the question was when, how often, and at what points in the game will votes be taken. So that's determined by the numbers printed on these tokens again. 4 rounds or tokens are not associated with votes. And then there's some double and triple voting regions, or excuse me, double and triple voting rounds where there's 2 4s, there's 2 6s, there's 2 8s, 2 10s, and 3 12s. So each of those rounds, there's going to be multiple places voting. You're going to kind of have to prioritize where you want to focus your efforts. Rounds 7 and 11, if I could find it, there's only 1 region voting. So again, there's a kind of dynamic flow and ebb to the game where different regions will be voting or not voting. Some rounds there's no votes at all. And that's just dictated by the random setup here. After you've played a few times and you kind of got the rules down, you got the strategy down, you can choose if you want to set up the game in like a specific scenario. If you want the regions to vote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you can do that. It's up to you. You can kind of set up the game however you want, or you can set it up randomly to keep it, more interesting the more and more you play it. So let's see if there's any more questions in the chat. Abby, hopefully you're learning more now, and hopefully I'm doing an okay job teaching. Kate, can't wait to get her copy. Me too. Hopefully, we've got about a week left, just a little less than a week left. It seems like we're doing well. Hopefully we fund and everyone can get their copy. Still nobody on YouTube, but that's all right. We're here to talk about Kickstarter. Okay. So this is the basic setup of the game, putting out the different round tokens to show how the game is going to be set up and when the votes are going to happen. So both in the multiplayer and the solo mode, there's kind of 1 or 2 last steps to set up the game. What I have here are various candidate cards. So every player is going to be dealt 2 random candidate cards. And from those cards, you'll have a choice of which one you want to play as. And they each have a special ability and they each have a different starting amount of influence cubes. Influence cubes are kind of a currency that you use to take certain actions, and also they're the influence that you use to win votes in a region. So I'm going to look at these two cards. I'm going to decide which one I like better, and I'm going to choose to play as Calvin today. The other card just gets discarded, removed from the game. You can try him out next time you play. So Calvin, I'm going to take my 2 influence cubes that I start the game with, and I'll explain my superpower or my special ability in a minute here after you learn a little bit more how to actually play. Okay, so like I mentioned, there's 11 rounds in the game. This prototype is an old copy. My apologies. So even though there's 12 out there, the final game will have 11 rounds. And each round follows the same structure. So how that works is the first round is the news phase, and that's pretty straightforward. There is a deck of news cards, and each card is going to have a different event that occurs that round that you might need to adjust your strategy a little bit. You might need to play a little differently than you would otherwise. It might change the rules slightly. So here is the example for this first round. So that card says frequent flyer. Plain cards do not cost an influence cube this round. So as you could probably guess, a plane typically costs you some influence to use. You got to pay to fly somewhere. Flights are expensive these days. But this round, because you're a frequent flyer, you don't have to pay. So we got another comment here from Ali. Thank you so much. A big shout out to OK Art Studio in Argentina. They've done really an amazing job with all the graphic design and art in the game. They're actually a couple. So Sebastian does the graphic design and Rocio does all of the illustrations. So, the combination of them two have just done a really, really good job, in my opinion. So a big shout out to them. Another comment in the chat. Patrick says, this looks like it would work well in a classroom or in a basic government class. Yeah. Like I mentioned, it's definitely drawn inspiration from, the actual political process that we follow here in the United States, where we're looking at the primary election. And obviously, to make it more of a fun board game than, a strict simulation, there's been a few things that are abstracted or simplified. But I definitely think, and I agree with you, it could be used as kind of a fun way to try and teach how our process works. It can get pretty complicated, but this would be a good point to start from, to understand, okay, how does a political party narrow down its candidates to become the final nominee? So thank you for all the comments in the chat. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to share and submit them in the Q&A. All right, so now that we've gone through the news phase, we'll go next into the action phase. And this is where really the meat of the game happens. And this is where all the fun is, in my opinion. So there's a small deck of cards that each player will get. I believe it's 14 cards each. And there's 7 different types of actions you can take with these cards. So I'll explain to you next what each card does. And each card type has a different quantity within your hand, just depending on which card it is. So the first card is the bus. And let's pretend here that this pawn is my candidate. This is Calvin right here. Calvin is going to be starting a game in Wisconsin, right in Madison, where I am right now. So the bus card, if I play the bus, allows me to move from my current region, this light blue here, to any adjacent region, and this is a free action. So I can move from the light blue to the light green for free. Don't have to spend any of my precious influence. There's one of those cards in my hand. There's also one plane card in my hand. So a plane, like we mentioned in the news this first round, is a way to get around the country, but unfortunately you have to pay to fly. So right now I've got 2 influence Sorry if you can't see all these cards. Let me try and move a little bit around here. So here's my candidate, Calvin. I'm going to put my influence on him. So I've got 2 influence to spend right now. The rest are in my personal bank of influence. Again, you have to earn this influence before you can spend it. So the 2 cubes over here on Calvin, I'm going to spend one of them. I'm going to return it to my bank. And now I can play my playing card and fly. So when I pay to fly, I can go anywhere I want in the country. Doesn't matter how close it is. Could be right next door. Very flexible card. Pay 1 influence cube, and you can fly anywhere. So I'm going to move to California. Again, 1 each of the bus and the plane in my hand. So now that I'm in a region that I like, maybe there's a vote coming up and I want all its population to vote for me, I might play a rally card. So there's 3 of these in your hand. And what the rally lets you do, let's pretend Calvin has a little bit more influence at the moment. He's got a bunch of influence cubes here now. So if you play a rally card, you take 2 of your cubes that are available to spend, and they get placed in the region where you're located. This is kind of like you're giving a big speech. You're holding a rally. You're trying to get people excited for you, spread your message. You want them to vote for you in the upcoming regional election. Again, the 2 influence cubes have to go where you're located. The next card is the positive add. So here is where you have a little bit of flexibility. You can take 1 cube and 1 only for each positive add card, and you can place it anywhere in the country. It's kind of like you're running a TV commercial, again, spreading the word, hey, vote for me. But I'm in California. I want people back home in Wisconsin to vote for me. You can do that with the positive add. You have 1 of those cards in your hand. So what's the opposite of a positive add? A negative add. This is kind of like your smear campaign. This is your attack ad. You want to sully your opponent's name. How that works, let me get a few more influence cubes out here. Let's say I'm playing against the green player, and he's or she has got a bunch of influence over here, and I want to play my negative add. This is a free action. It doesn't cost me any of my influence cubes, and I can simply remove 1 cube from any opponent, take it off the map, and send it back into their bank. That's the negative add. Same as the positive add, there's only 1 each in your hand. So these are the different ways that you can move around the country, kind of spread your influence, or try and reduce some of your opponent's influence. Now, you might be wondering, well, how do I gain this influence in the first place to pay to fly or to hold a rally or to pay for my TV commercials? Well, the first way is with a fundraiser. This is a pretty straightforward approach to gaining influence. Each fundraiser card you play, you take 1 influence cube out of your bank, and now it's available to spend in your hand. 1 influence cube per card. Very straightforward, very simple, kind of a slow and steady way to get influence. So the final card is a little bit more complex, and it plays into how the action phase actually works. So let me explain that to you. So every round at the beginning of the action phase, all players are going to choose from their hand of cards that I've just started to explain to you here. They're going to choose 4 cards. They're going to place them face down, and they're going to place them in the order that they want them to happen. So left to right, I've chosen a specific order for each of these cards that I want to happen. And I'm going to do that. Second player is going to do that. Third player is going to do that. However many people are playing, up to 5, will be choosing their cards and placing them face down. So once we're ready to start, everyone's committed their cards. They feel good about their strategy. First player, shown with this little token here, will start the action phase and flip over their first card and take its action. Second player will flip over their first card and take its action. Third player will flip over their first card and take its action. Now it's back to me, first player. I'm going to flip over my second, do its thing. Second player, second card, third player, Second card, back to me. I'm going to play my third card, third card, third card, fourth card, fourth card, fourth card. That's the basic premise. And as you can see with the different card types, even though you've planned a strategy for the round, you might need to react to what somebody else has done. That's a little bit easier with the bus and the plane, where you might move somewhere else because somebody already went there. Or the positive and negative ad, you don't have to choose where to place your ad until you flip the card over. But the rally, when you're there, you got to do it. Even if somebody else is kind of swept in and trying to steal the election out from under you, you still have to play every card that you commit face down. So the last card type is the Super PAC. How does that work? So every player plays their 4 cards face down. Whoever plays the most Super PAC cards in a round gains 4 influence cubes from their bank into their hand that are then available to spend next round. But if there's a tie, if players tied with more than 1 Super PAC card, each tied player gains 2 influence cubes. So there's a little bit of a risk when you're playing the Super PAC. In theory, if I only played 1 Super PAC card and none of my opponents did, I could still win and get all 4 influence cubes. It's a pretty good deal. It's a very efficient way to gain influence. On the other hand, I could play 4 Super PACs, really go all out, and try and win the Super PAC this round. But if one of my opponents also had the same plan, also played 4 Super PAC cards, we would each only get 2 cubes. And that's not a very efficient way of earning your influence. 4 cards for 2 influence cubes, it's not a great deal. Also, any card that you play towards the Super PAC, if you don't win, if you don't have the most, or if you're not tied for the most, they're just kind of useless. They're wasted that round. So it's a very risky way to play. There's a lot of tension when you're trying to decide, I need some cubes this round, or I need some cubes for next round. Do I want to play Super PACs? Do I want to play fundraisers? How risky are my opponents? What do I think their strategy is? There's a lot of mind games going on when you're choosing which of these cards you want to play each round. So that's the action phase. These are the action cards. Hopefully that makes sense to you. If not, feel free to drop a comment in on the chat or submit a question through the Q&A. I don't see anything in there just yet. Let me check and see if we got a first viewer on YouTube. Nope, just me. No worries. All right, so that's the action phase. Now let's learn about the vote phase. So let's pretend that it is round 3. And 15 delegates are at stake in this light green region here. So let's say the news happened, the action phase happened. Now it's time for the vote. We're going to check to see who has the most influence in the region, and that's who's going to win the regional vote. Right now, the green player has 1, 2 influence, and me, the blue player, has 1, 2, 3 influence. Your pawn, your candidate, does count as an influence, so it really matters where you are when it comes time to vote. If I was over here in Texas and forgot about the vote here, or just didn't care, or for whatever reason, now I would only have 2 influence. So let's say it's 3-2, and I win 15 delegates. I would take an extra cube from my bank, put it over here on the scoring track around the board, and I now have a 15-point lead over the green player. So let's say instead it was round 4, and we were going to vote over here in Illinois in the purple region. This region is a little bit different, where it has a first place and a second place, like I mentioned earlier. Now that I have 3 influence, green only has 2, I would get 13 delegates, and green would get 5. Kind of a consolation prize for coming in second. As you play with more and more players, second place gets more and more interesting as you try and fight over that secondary award. So let's pretend for a second green had no influence in the region. They didn't care. They didn't bother to campaign over here. I would get all 18 delegates. I would add the first and the second place together. If there's a tie, let's say green had 2, blue has 2, you would sum up 13 and 5, 18, split it down the middle, 9 and 9. If there's any remainder, if you're trying to divide an odd number by 2, you would just discard the leftover remainder. There's a few other tiebreaker scenarios if you're playing with 3 players. Let me get another cube out to show you what could happen. So let's pretend green has 2, blue has 2, red has 1. Green and blue tied for first, so they're going to boot out third player, sorry red, and then they're going to sum up and split it down the middle. Let's pretend green and red tied for second place. They would split the 5. Blue would still have all of first place, all to myself. So those are the different ways you can kind of split a vote, or how you count the influence during votes and see who gets their delegates. Let me leave a couple cubes out here just to show the next phase. The next phase is the organize phase. What you do during the organize phase is just kind of clean up the board. You're getting set up for the next round. First thing that you want to do, flip over this round token. So you're going to show, okay, that round is over. If it's voted, you know it's done voting. If it's down here in the corner, you just know that that round has been completed. If there was a vote, any cubes, influence cubes in a region that has already voted, clear it off the map, put it back in your bank to be gained and spent. Same thing with green, back in the bank. Need to earn those again before I can spend them and spread my influence. The voting marker moves to the next round. So that was 4. Now we're going over to 5. And you will pass your first player token to the next player. Usually just go clockwise, moving 1 player at a time. If you haven't already, you'll take your 4 action cards, and you'll take them back into your hand. You have the same action cards available to you every round. There is a few exceptions in the news deck, so a few of those cards might affect which of these action cards are available to you every round, or maybe some of them are stronger, some of them are weaker, depending on the news. That's where some of the variation comes to play with the different action cards that are available to you. And then once you're done with the organize phase, you're ready to go into the next round. Starts again, same thing, news, action, vote, organize. Same thing every round, same structure. So that is basically how to play the primary. There's also the solo mode, which I've mentioned, and that just adds another little layer there on top to get the same experience of the normal multiplayer game, but maybe your group can't make it this week. Maybe somebody got sick. But you still really want to play the primary. You can play against the ElectoBot 9000, and the ElectoBot 9000 is the robotic incumbent candidate. So he is programmed in his algorithms to come around and try to gain influence, try to prevent you from winning the super PAC, trying to destroy your chances at winning the nomination. So I can get into how that works. Let me just reset the board here a little bit to show you how you set up the game for the solo variant. Again, before we get started on this, if you have any questions, let me know. Put it in the chat or the Q&A. It looks like we got a new one. Let's see what we have here. So Kate's got a comment. Let me move over here so I can read it. Kate loves strategy games. Me too. It seems like a game full of strategy, but not too difficult to learn or explain. Hope you notice that each game is fairly different with the different cards. Yeah. So one of the goals for the design of this game was to make it very replayable. I didn't want something where you play it once and you kind of get the feel for it, you get the experience, and you don't feel a need to play it again. But I think there's a few things here that help the replayability. And you can see that between the candidate cards, where each candidate has their own unique ability and kind of changes how you play the game and what kind of strategy you might take. To the random setup for the regions. Each time you play, you can do a different random setup, and it'll be a pretty drastic different feel for, okay, this region is worth a lot and it voted at the end, but next game it voted at the very beginning, and wow, that just changed everything. To the news, which is one of my favorite aspects of the game. Just each round you're getting something new thrown at you, a curveball, something that you have to change your strategy, hopefully adapt to it better than your opponents. So I think there's a decent amount of replayability kind of intentionally designed into the game. And I hope that you guys feel that as well. So thank you, Kate, for the question. I hope that's not too big of a concern for you. So yeah, we're talking about the Electobot 9000 now. Let's move this back here, kind of reset the board. So like I mentioned, the Electobot is the incumbent candidate for your party. So when you go to set up the game, let's say he's a green robot this time, you can choose a different difficulty setting based on how many influence cubes he's going to start the game with when he kind of sets up. So I'm just going to count out here real quick. 21 cubes. That's kind of your standard default difficulty right now. And what you're going to do is you're going to go around the map, choose a region, and you're going to roll the die. So there's a custom die. It's got 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, and 3. And you're going to roll this die for each region. I rolled a 0. So that means I'm not going to place any influence in this region for the Electobot. I'm going to go around each region, rolling the die. And if I roll a number, like I did here, a 3, the bot is going to get 3 influence in that region. He's the incumbent. He's going to start with a big fan base. He's going to have a lot of very vocal supporters who are in his favor. And you got a little bit of a hill to climb in your fight against Electobot. So you're going to keep rolling and placing influence for the robot. And I just do this kind of across the board. You can do it in a random pattern. You can do it from most delegates to least delegates. In the end, it might affect the outcome a little bit in the terms of how the game ends up in the end, but I like to change it up every time I play, again, that kind of replayability aspect. So all the Electobot's influence is out there on the map. How do we play the game against it? So similar to the multiplayer game, we're going to get set up. The bot starts the game in the region with the most total delegates. That's always up here in the northeast. I think I failed to mention this earlier, but kind of the last step of the setup is choosing a home region. So Calvin here, again, he starts with 2 influence cubes. Separate from those, you get 2 influence cubes from the bank and your pawn, and you get to choose where you start the game, and this is kind of your home region. So you might try and target a region that's going to vote early. Round 3 would be the earliest in this setup, or you might choose a region that has a lot of delegates at stake, like maybe over here in California or down here in Florida. Or because you're fighting against this incumbent, you might want to go somewhere where he doesn't have any influence or doesn't have much influence. So there's some different choices there when you're setting up your home region, but I'll choose right here just for an example. So now that you're set up, every round follows the same pattern or the same structure as the multiplayer game. You're going to go through, you're going to choose your news card, you're going to pick your action cards and place them face down. Well, you're not playing against a human, so you don't have to put them face down, but you're going to choose your 4 action cards. So let's just go through and say I'm going to play these 4 cards. Whoa. Okay. So where the difference comes in between my 4 cards, and you can't really see those, can you? Sorry about that. I'm going to move some of this around here. I've chosen my 4 action cards. There's Calvin with my influence. Now, in between those cards, after the first 2, but before the second 2, I'm going to put a bot card face down. So just like normal, I'm going to flip my first card and take its action. Fundraiser. I get an influence cube. Second card, another fundraiser. I get an influence cube. Now, before I move on to my third and fourth action cards, I'm going to see what the Electobot is up to. So at the top of the card, there's a few criteria that determine where the bot is going to move. And each card is different, and each card is kind of determined by what's going on in the game, who's got influence where, who's winning, who's losing. So let's see what this example says. Move the bot to the region where you have the most influence cubes. So that's easy. I only have influence in this region, so the bot would move right here next to me. Let's say, for instance, I also had 2 influence cubes over here. Now the bot isn't sure where he needs to go. His programming doesn't quite have the answer yet. So you'll move the bot to the region where you have the most influence cubes, and you'll go to the second line, voting next. So between the 2 regions where I have the most influence cubes, the one that's voting next is here, number 3. So again, he would move here right next to me. If for whatever reason that wasn't the case, let's say both of these regions were voting in round 12, move the bot to the region where I have the most influence cubes, can't determine just yet. Voting next, can't determine just yet. They're both voting at the same time. Then you move down to your third criteria, worth the most total delegates. So this is 15, this is 16. He's going to choose this region now. So you're always going to run through these criteria, adding them together when they can't determine fully where the bot should move. So once the bot moves to a region, you're going to look at the text box just below, and it's going to give you some instructions. This card says, place 1 bot cube in all regions adjacent to it. So that's pretty devastating this early in the game. None of the regions have voted. There's a lot of regions adjacent to here. So he's going to end up putting down 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 influence cubes out onto the map, all adjacent to his current region. Some of these might place cubes in his current region. This one goes to adjacent regions. He might remove your influence. It kind of just varies from card to card what's going to happen. So he's a pretty unpredictable opponent. The final thing here is the super pack. So again, you're going to take this die and you're going to roll. And we got a 2. So I'm going to check down here. Each card is different, so make sure you're paying attention. If I roll a 2, that is worth 2 super pack cards. So he doesn't need to win the super pack to gain influence. The bot simply blocks you if you've attempted to play a super pack card. So luckily, I'm only playing fundraisers so far. I don't need to be concerned about the super pack. But if I had played super pack cards in the rest of my hand, he could potentially tie me or beat me outright when checking for the super pack. So going through my last 2 cards now, rally, drop my cubes, and a negative add. Maybe I will take some bot cubes out of here. Now he's got no influence, so I've got a better shot at winning that one. That's how I would play the action phase. Again, you can skip rolling the die for the super pack if you know you didn't play any and it's not going to be relevant to that round. The vote phase happens just the same way. The organize phase happens just the same way. Every round you're going to pick a new bot card, start it face down. Once you get after your first card, your second action card, then you'll flip the bot card. That's how it works. That's how he moves around, drops his cubes, tries to beat you for the nomination. Let me check, see if there's any more questions. It looks like Allie sent something in. Let's see if I can read this. I saw something about getting your name on a news card. What's that about? So you are correct. There's a new pledge level that I just released recently. There was previously a pledge level where you could kind of become a candidate and get your likeness, illustrated onto a candidate card. And those went super fast. They went, right away on day one. And people ever since have been asking me, that was really cool. I wish there were more of those available. How can I kind of get myself into the game, get my name in there, get my face on there? So, like Ali mentioned, there's a new pledge level, and I wish I had a better example to show you. But on the news cards, there's going to be a new edition, and the design and the layout of these news cards are going to be altered a little bit in order to accommodate this new pledge level. So, the premise of this news card is that you're scrolling through your phone and you read a headline. This round, it's plutocracy. Somebody wrote this article about the current events this round and the effect that it has on the game. In this new pledge level, there'll be a space here where your name and kind of like your headshot or your profile picture will show up, attributing you to the authorship of that news card. So you're going to be a journalist in the primary. You're going to have your name on the byline. If you're interested, it's on the Kickstarter. There's a nice little mock-up from the artist that'll show what it might look like. They just have a blank picture in there right now, but it's another chance for you to kind of get involved and become a permanent fixture within the primary. So thanks, Ali, for asking about that. Again, if you're interested, check it out on the Kickstarter. If you have any more specific questions, let me know. Since there are only 18 news cards in the game, the pledge level is limited to 18 backers. So if you're interested, make sure you kind of go ahead and get one now. I don't know how fast or slow that those will go. I don't see any more questions just yet. Let's check. Let's make a bet. Let's see if anybody's on YouTube. Nope. If you said no, you are correct. So that's kind of how you set up and play the primary, how you play against the incumbent robot Electobot 9000. Let me know if you have any more questions. I don't think I'm going to go through and play a full game. I know we've been running for like 40 minutes or so. I don't want to take up everybody's full night here. But let's see this next. It looks like there's another game here, or another question, sorry. Can you buy the game in stores? Not yet. The Kickstarter is probably going to be your best chance to get one. There have been, I think, 3, maybe 4 local game stores, just small mom and pop places that have pledged for a few copies here and there. So if you're lucky and one of those is in your hometown, then maybe you can pick one up at the store. Otherwise, really just the Kickstarter is the way to go. It'd be awesome if I could get into more stores, or I don't think it's ever going to get to Walmart or Target necessarily. But if you're interested, let your local store know that, maybe I don't have the funds right now to back the Kickstarter, but I'd be interested later in the line. Let them know, and maybe they'll get a couple copies. Let them know that there's some demand. So thank you, Abby, for that question. The answer is not really, unless things change in the future. Kickstarter is your best bet. Let's see, nothing in the chat, nothing on YouTube. So yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me tonight and watching and submitting questions and backing the game. For all the backers who are out there watching, or even if you're not watching, just thank you so much for all the support so far during the process. It's been amazing just to see people get excited, and all the kind words and the shout outs and the posts on social media. It just means so much. And I'm excited, hopefully we can fund. I want to get the games out there to you so you can play and have as much fun with it as I have. So yeah, 6 days left. Hopefully this was useful for you. Hopefully you found it entertaining, not too boring, or at least informative, teach you how to play a little bit about the design. Yeah, I think there's 20% left to go. So if you want, spread the word, let somebody know, tell a friend who you might think would be interested. There's some cool stretch goals coming up as we unlock the different project achievements. So some of those are linked to social media goals. Some of them are linked to funding goals. And the number of backers that we get on the project. So as we get more and more support for the project, you can unlock some cool stuff and add in more components or some cool quality or aesthetic upgrades for the game. And hopefully we can knock some of those out here in the last week. So thank you very much. Kate, thanks for the kind words again. Hopefully everyone agrees with you and thinks that it's a well thought out design here. There's also one more in the Q&A before I sign off. Abby wants to know, do I have to like politics to like this game? I would say no. You don't have to. Hopefully from my kind of teaching you here tonight how to set it up and how to play, you can see you don't really need to know anything about politics. You don't need to know how the government works. You don't need to know what are the important issues or how to debate about them. It's more of a strategy game. How do I work around the map? How do I get the most influence? How do I best play my action cards and outwit my opponents or out-strategize my opponents? So it's definitely not required to enjoy the game. You might get a little bit more of a kick out of it if you enjoy politics, or you can get some of the references here and there in the news or from the Super PAC cards. You might find a little bit more satisfaction playing the game. So hopefully if you're out there and you're kind of on the fence, don't let the political theme throw you off or turn you away. There's not really any politics involved in the gameplay. Just strategy, tactics. How can you outmaneuver your opponents? So thanks for the question, Abby. Thanks for everyone else who sent stuff in and went on the chat. I appreciate you taking the time to come out and watch. So I think that's probably going to be it for tonight. I hope you all have a good night. Thanks again. I've had a lot of fun with this, and hopefully you have too. Have a good night. And also on YouTube, good night to you. I'm not sure if anyone joined, but that's all right. I will see you later.